The forest is dead. Smoke drifts like a living ghost between skeletal trees, whispering through hollow trunks that once carried birdsong. The ground crackles beneath layers of cooling ash where roots still smolder and insects perish in silence. Every surface carries the memory of heat, bark blistered, stones fractured, air heavy with the scent of burned life. The sun filters weakly through a ceiling of gray haze, turning the world into a fever dream of light and ruin. No wings flutter, no paw stirs. The silence feels unnatural, almost sacred. Yet on the edges of this desolation, faint impressions disturb the soot, massive circular prints pressed deep into the earth. Something large walked away from the heart of fire. Each print is a defiance, each step a declaration that the wild has not surrendered completely. In this stillness, survival has left its handwriting, raw, heavy, and unfinished. Among the ruins stands a single survivor, a cabin blackened by fire but unbroken by time. Its roof sags like a wounded beast, timbers charred yet stubbornly upright. The wind moves through its hollow windows, carrying the dry rattle of burned glass. Inside, the air is thick with ghosts of smoke and something older, fear. The floorboards creak under fallen debris, melted utensils, torn fabric, a burnt photograph curled like a dying leaf. Near the fireplace, a table has collapsed, its legs scorched and twisted, and beneath it, faint claw marks score the wood in frantic patterns. Ashes lie uneven, shaped by movement that should not have existed during the blaze. No insects hum, no life returns. The structure endures, not as shelter, but as evidence. Whatever happened inside this place was not random destruction. The cabin has become a witness, silent, watchful, waiting for the forest to speak again.
Morning rises reluctantly over a land that no longer remembers color. The forest floor is gray and brittle, the air still scented with the bitterness of smoke. Amid the silence, subtle stories hide in the ash, disturbed soil, half-buried paw prints, the faintest drag mark from something heavy being moved. Close to the cabin, the outline of a boot print interrupts the animal tracks, its edges deep and decisive. It ends abruptly at the doorway, as though the owner vanished mid-step. Inside, chaos lingers, overturned chairs, torn cloth, and streaks of dried blood glinting beneath a film of soot. Something violent unfolded here, swift, desperate, unfinished. The light filters through cracks, illuminating floating dust like suspended time. Outside, the forest holds its breath, aware that balance has been broken. The fire did not simply destroy, it erased and concealed. Whatever truth burned here is buried beneath the same silence that protects it. By the fractured hearth, the outline of a human body remains, charred into the floorboards, distorted beyond recognition. His fingers, fused by heat, still clutch the rusted shape of a rifle. Nearby, a spent bullet casing gleams faintly in the ash, the only glint in a sea of black. The walls are streaked with claw marks, deep and desperate, cutting through smoke-stained wood. Something had fought here, not fire alone, but flesh, muscle, and fear. The man's final position suggests struggle, body twisted, arm reaching toward the door, mouth frozen in a silent gasp that the flames devoured. Around him, fragments of fabric, fur, and shattered glass suggest he wasn't alone when death arrived. The fire may have claimed his body, but it did not erase the story. Every burn, every scratch, whispers of conflict, a battle between two survivors caught inside a storm neither of them started.
Beyond the ruins, the earth softens into a slope of ash where the rain has not yet fallen. Here, the ground holds the imprint of something heavy that walked away from the inferno. Massive paw prints arc through soot, steady and deliberate. The size suggests power, the direction purpose. Each print grows fainter with distance, fading into the fog where burned pines still release thin ribbons of smoke. It's clear one creature left this place alive. The symmetry of the tracks implies more than instinct. It speaks of awareness, of will. No human could have survived such heat, not barefoot, not unarmed. Yet these steps continue unbroken into the ghostly wilderness. The silence follows them like breath. Whatever happened within that cabin did not end with the fire. It walked away, bearing the weight of both survival and vengeance in every measured stride toward the untouched dark. Near a melted beam, half buried in soot, a small red light still blinks. The Wildfire camera, its casing warped, lens cracked, endures, defiant against ruin. Its memory card remains intact, sealed inside the melted shell. Around it, footprints circle as though someone, or something, returned here before the world cooled. The camera's eye had witnessed everything. The shadows before the flames, the struggle within the cabin, the movement after silence. Its lens now stares at nothing but ash, yet it hums faintly, recording the stillness as if unwilling to let the story end. Nature has begun reclaiming the edges, first insects, then wind. The blinking light flickers once more before dying completely, leaving only the soft hiss of settling soot. Evidence of life reduced to technology's last heartbeat, waiting for discovery by eyes that might never understand what truly unfolded in this charred cradle of survival and death.
The forest once thrived in silence too, but of another kind. A silence of peace, broken only by rustling leaves, dripping dew, and the soft pulse of life beneath the soil. Rivers ran silver under dawn light, and distant growls belonged to predators obeying nature's rhythm. The cabin then was forgotten, swallowed by vines, its roof carpeted in moss. No human foot disturbed its path for years. In the distance, a storm brewed, not of weather but of intent. From the ridge, a figure moved between the trees carrying steel, leaving faint human scent in the air. The animals noticed first. Birds went quiet. Deer fled. The forest stiffened. The calm before the fire was not ignorance. It was warning. Somewhere deep within the brush, a creature stirred, ancient and watchful. The forest held its breath, sensing that its balance was about to be broken forever. She emerged from the river's mist like a moving boulder, fur dark with water, eyes sharp with maternal vigilance. 2 cubs followed, smaller shadows clinging close to her steps. Her senses were tuned to every scent, every rustle, every tremor of the earth. Hunger guided her movements, protection fueled her existence. The forest was her world, unchallenged, untamed, pure. Yet the wind changed that morning. It carried something unfamiliar: gasoline, sweat, iron. The mother lifted her head, tasting danger in the air. She led her cubs deeper into the valley, unaware of the trap fate had already set. Above her, a hawk circled low, uneasy. The sunlight caught the reflection of metal far away, a glint from a rifle scope hidden in leaves. The hunter had arrived. But nature's oldest guardian was not prey. Not yet. The forest itself was preparing for something far deadlier than either of them.
The day broke in stillness, but the scent arrived before the sound. A whisper of burning pine, sharp and wrong, drifted through the valley.
Birds took flight, their wings slicing through the air in frantic bursts. The mother bear stopped, muscles tense, nose raised. Her cubs pressed close, confused. In the distance, smoke coiled upward like a living serpent, winding between the trees. The forest began to panic, the unspoken language of fear spreading through creatures that sensed what humans ignored. Flames had not yet appeared, but the wind carried their promise. Dry leaves rustled with unnatural urgency, and somewhere far off, an explosion cracked the morning open. The mother turned toward the sound, growling low, her instincts torn between retreat and curiosity. The cubs whimpered, unaware that the horizon's soft orange glow was not dawn, but the beginning of their trial by fire. It began with a gust, a single breath that turned to fury. Flames erupted across the ridge, devouring dry undergrowth with ravenous speed. Trees snapped under the heat, their resin exploding into showers of sparks. The air thickened, glowing amber, filled with drifting embers like dying stars. Animals fled in waves, deer crashing through brush, foxes darting through shadows, owls scattering into the blinding smoke. The mother bear charged uphill, cubs stumbling after her, every movement against a wind that now howled like a living beast. The fire advanced with terrifying intelligence, circling, chasing, cornering. The forest screamed without sound, branches collapsing in bursts of flame. Behind them, the world dissolved into a storm of red and black. Ahead, through the chaos, stood the faint outline of salvation. A forgotten cabin at the forest's edge, untouched for years, waiting unknowingly to become the last refuge of the hunted.
The inferno descended with the precision of a living predator. Flames leapt from trunk to trunk, moving faster than breath. The forest floor, once damp and alive, erupted into waves of molten leaves. The air itself caught fire. Sparks spun like stars falling in reverse. The mother bear ran blindly through the smoke, her cubs crying behind her. Every breath scraped like sandpaper inside her throat. The horizon was no longer sky, but liquid flame, folding upon itself in violent motion. Tree roots burst under the pressure of heat, releasing geysers of embers that chased the fleeing creatures. Birds dropped mid-flight, their wings consumed before they hit the ground. The fire had its own rhythm, violent, merciless, deliberate. In that endless roar, the forest's voice was swallowed whole. Every living being became a silhouette against the light, running not towards safety, but away from the dying world. Smoke thickened into walls that closed around them like a cage. The mother bear pushed forward, guiding her cubs through a collapsing maze of trees. Each stride sank into burning moss. Each breath seared her lungs. Behind them, entire groves fell in unison, their trunks exploding into showers of sparks that painted the cubs' fur with glowing dust. She turned once, only long enough to see the horizon turn crimson, a curtain of flame swallowing the distance. Every instinct screamed to run faster, but the forest offered no path. The sound of destruction grew rhythmic, almost mechanical, like a vast heartbeat pounding through the earth. Somewhere in that chaos, an unnatural scent mixed with the smoke. Fuel, oil, human interference. The mother didn't understand its meaning, but the forest did. This was no accident of nature. Something had summoned the fire, something intelligent and cruel.
Through the veil of smoke, a faint shape appeared, angles and lines that didn't belong to the wild. The cabin stood half hidden by the scorched trunks, its roof sagging, but its walls still intact. The fire avoided it, swirling around as though respecting its old age. The mother bear stopped, chest heaving, eyes narrowed. The cubs huddled close, trembling under her shadow. Behind them, the forest howled. Before them, Silence waited inside the cabin's dark threshold. The air there was different, cold, metallic, and thick with the scent of something long human. For a heartbeat, time paused. The decision wasn't reasoned, it was survival. The mother charged forward, shattering the brittle door with a single strike. The sound echoed through the smoke like thunder. Wood splintered, dust rose, and for the first time since the fire began, the family vanished from the burning light into the unknown dark. The cabin swallowed them whole. The interior was a cavern of shadows, filled with stale air and forgotten decay. Dust hung in suspension, glinting faintly in the dim red light that leaked through the cracks. The floor creaked beneath massive paws, each step stirring ghosts of human presence. A broken chair lay overturned near the hearth, a rifle resting across it, half cleaned, still smelling of oil. The cubs sniffed the air, confused and afraid. The mother paced, growling softly, her instincts unsure whether this place meant safety or danger. The outside world screamed with fire, yet inside, another kind of threat slept. Footsteps had once moved here, recently, fresh enough to disturb the dust. The smell of sweat lingered. The cabin was not abandoned as it seemed. Something human still claimed it, hidden somewhere beyond the thin partition walls, listening as the wild entered its stolen domain.
The air changed without movement, carrying the faint vibration of another heartbeat. The mother froze, ears twitching. Somewhere deep inside the cabin, a board creaked, a careful, deliberate sound. The cubs whimpered. Shadows shifted near the back wall, where a thin curtain swayed from a hidden draft. The smell grew clearer now, gunpowder, fear, and blood. The bear's muscles tightened, her breath deepened. The curtain trembled again. She turned her head, eyes burning gold in the dim light, just as something behind it shifted. A figure crouched, his breath ragged, his scent poisoned with panic. The forest's chaos had driven predator and prey into the same cage. Outside, fire raged unchecked, sealing every escape. Inside, survival was no longer about species. It was about instinct. Two trapped beings shared one truth. Neither could afford to be the first to move, nor the last to act. The silence ruptured like a breaking bone. The man lunged from the shadows, weapon half raised, eyes wide with fear rather than dominance. The bear reared up, her roar shaking the cabin walls, shattering a window and a rain of glass. The rifle discharged, a deafening crack that vanished under the fire's thunder outside. The bullet grazed the wall, tearing through smoke and dust. The cubs fled behind debris as the mother charged forward, her weight shaking the floor. The man stumbled backward, crashing into a table, scattering empty shells and half-eaten rations. Wood splintered, fur and flesh blurred in chaos. No victor, no control, only survival. When the gun clicked empty, silence returned, broken only by labored breathing. The fire outside roared closer, painting the cabin's interior red. Two enemies stood amidst ruin, surrounded by a world ending faster than their hatred could decide who should die first.
Time fractured into fragments of motion. The bear's claws raked across the floorboards, tearing through furniture as the man rolled aside, coughing from smoke. Every sound blurred into a storm of noise, fire, heartbeat, impact. The room burned brighter, light flickering through shattered windows like a strobe of apocalypse. The man reached for another weapon, a hunting knife glowing orange from heat. The bear's paws struck first, sending him crashing into the corner wall. Blood sprayed against blackened wood, mixing with soot. But when she approached for the final blow, something halted her. One of her cubs, trapped under a fallen beam, crying weakly. The bear turned, lifting the wood with her shoulder, freeing the trembling body beneath.
In that hesitation, the man crawled toward the rifle again. Outside, trees collapsed, their sound folding into thunder. Inside, two species fought not for dominance, but for the right to exist another minute. The flames reached the cabin's walls, gnawing at the wood with a hiss like breathing. Smoke poured through the cracks, filling the air with heat and blindness. The man coughed blood, his wounds deep, his movements slowing. The bear circled him but no longer attacked. The cubs clung to her side, eyes wide, gasping. The fire pressed closer, its reflection glowing across every surface, painting death in orange light. The roof began to creak and weep tar. The man stumbled toward the door, but was forced back by a wave of heat. The cabin had turned into a furnace, alive and furious. Each inhale scorched lungs, each step left burns on the skin. For both man and beast, the difference between inside and outside no longer mattered. There was only survival, suspended on the razor edge between fire and suffocation. The air itself had become the enemy.
Survival rewrote the laws of nature. In the choking haze, the man collapsed near the door, his breath shallow, his weapon forgotten. The bear, chest heaving, stood motionless a few feet away. Between them, the air shimmered with heat, but neither moved to strike. Instinct gave way to exhaustion. Outside, the forest wailed, an endless chorus of dying timber and unseen creatures. The cubs huddled beside their mother, and for a brief moment, the two species shared the same rhythm of fear. The man looked toward the window, where the sky glowed red as an open wound. The bear's head turned in the same direction. They both knew what waited beyond: death. In that terrible stillness, no roar, no scream, no human word could bridge the distance. Only the fire could decide who it would take first and who it would leave to witness the other's end. The world outside ceased to exist. The flames engulfed everything, wrapping the cabin in a cocoon of molten air. The roof sagged, boards snapping under invisible weight. Sparks rained down like a blizzard of stars. Inside, shapes moved slower now. One human, one beast, both fading into silhouettes carved from smoke. The walls glowed from within, light bleeding through every crack. The man crawled toward the shattered window, the bear turned toward her cubs, and time folded in on itself. The forest screamed with wind and fire, but no echo reached the open world beyond. This cabin had become its own planet of survival, orbiting the edge of extinction. Nothing outside could penetrate it, nothing inside could escape. And yet, somewhere beneath the roar, the faintest heartbeat persisted, a stubborn rhythm, refusing to surrender to the flames, waiting for fate's next cruel command to fall.
When dawn's pale light filtered through cracks in the burning haze, the shape of the human finally revealed itself. His face was hidden beneath ash and blood, features carved by exhaustion and fire. One arm hung limp, skin blistered, veins swollen with infection. Around his wrist, a band of burnt leather bore scratched emblem, proof of purpose, not accident. The man was not a lost traveler, he was a hunter. The floor near him told stories his mouth could not: spent cartridges, broken traps, and a blackened map marked with circles deep in the forest. The mother bear watched from the shadows, her breath steady, her wounds bleeding slow. Both creatures were cornered in a cage of heat and ruin. Neither had victory, both carried intent. The fire's glow framed them like a portrait of nature's cruel irony, predator and prey, equalized by the same devouring flame. Time fractured again, stretching into an unbearable silence. The air shimmered in waves, thick with smoke that made shapes where none existed. The hunter lay motionless, eyes open, chest rising faintly. The mother bear studied him, aware of weakness, aware of risk. Her instincts demanded flight, but the fire had sealed the exits. The cubs whimpered in the corner, pressing against the soot-streaked wall as the heat pulsed through the floorboards. Beyond the windows, orange shadows danced, trees collapsing, skies bleeding light. Inside, the scent of oil and fur mingled, forming a single breath of survival shared between enemies. Every creak of the cabin sounded like a heartbeat, every ember like a whisper of warning. The balance between life and death hung by the weight of stillness itself. It was not compassion that froze them. It was the recognition that violence here would serve no master but the fire itself.
The cabin flickered between light and darkness, a pulse that mimicked life. Each flash from the surrounding inferno cast momentary clarity, claws glinting with soot, a rifle's barrel reflecting flame, two pairs of eyes locked across smoke. Between those flashes, blackness returned, thick and consuming. The fire was shrinking their world inch by inch. Dust rained from the ceiling, fine as snow, coating the fallen debris. The cub's small movements disturbed the ash, leaving delicate trails beside larger, heavier prints. The hunter shifted once, pain twisting his body into silence. The bear remained where she was, anchored by instinct and confusion. Outside, wind howled against the walls, but within, time seemed to forget motion. Every sound became distant, muffled, as if the world had stepped away to let them decide their fate alone. The fire illuminated not enemies anymore, but survivors, breathing in rhythm with the earth's dying pulse. Smoke claimed the air, thick as liquid, filling lungs with poison and fear. The mother bear lowered her head, shielding the cubs with her body. The man pressed his hand against his chest, feeling each labored breath fight for space in his collapsing lungs. Oxygen became currency, spent quickly, earned slowly. The walls sweated resin, sizzling as it dripped into the growing fire line at the baseboards. Outside, the storm of flames roared like ocean waves, endless and blind. The cabin groaned under pressure, beams cracking like brittle bones. Inside that claustrophobic dark, only shapes moved, slow, careful, resigned. For one fragile heartbeat, the boundaries between predator and prey blurred entirely. There was no hunt, no survival, just the shared instinct of beings unwilling to die. The smoke hid their eyes, but not their awareness of each other. In that blindness, a fragile, wordless truce began to form. From beneath the debris came a small, trembling sound, a cub's cry, thin but alive. The mother bear turned sharply, instincts burning brighter than the fire outside. She clawed through the wreckage, each movement sending sparks into the air. Beneath a fallen beam, one cub squirmed, trapped by a splintered plank. Her strength surged beyond exhaustion, lifting the beam with her shoulder and dragging the cub free. Its small body trembled, coated in ash, heartbeat fluttering like wings. Across the room, the man stared, expression unreadable through the smoke. Something in that raw display of protection pierced through his fading rage. The bear did not attack, though she could have. Her purpose was elsewhere, to keep her young breathing, no matter what burned around them. In that moment, the fire became a distant noise, secondary to the sound of one fragile heartbeat rescued from the weight of destruction. The rifle lay abandoned now, its barrel warped by heat, its chamber empty. Metal expanded, creaked, and finally split with a quiet pop that echoed like a sigh of surrender. The man's eyes lingered on it, a symbol of control now rendered useless. His hands trembled, slick with blood and soot. Across from him, the bear's stance shifted, muscles relaxing slightly, as if recognizing the weapon's death. The air between them was no longer threat but exhaustion. Flames pressed against the outer walls, glowing through every crack, their light flickering like heartbeat monitors of the dying earth. The man coughed, collapsing beside the ruined rifle. The cubs whimpered, unsure if the silence meant peace or pause. Nothing in the world moved now except the fire, which seemed to watch with hunger, patient for whichever life faltered first inside its tightening circle of heat and ash. Outside, the inferno raged unchecked, its sound now deeper, more alive. It moved with purpose, circling the cabin like a predator hunting the trapped within. Every gust of wind carried a chorus of burning pine and collapsing timber. The man crawled toward the window, forcing it open enough to drag in a breath of toxic air. The mother bear flinched, but did not strike. Her focus remained on her cubs. The fire outside reflected in their eyes, two tiny suns flickering with confusion and terror. For the first time, predator and prey faced the same adversary, an enemy that neither could understand nor defeat. It had no body to wound, no weakness to exploit. The forest had turned against itself, and within its ruin, two remnants of its living history now stood together, bound by necessity, stripped of dominance. Fire had made equals of everything it touched. The man tore a board from the wall, using it to smash at a section of the window. The frame gave way, coughing out a cloud of embers. Fresh air rushed in, sharp and cruel, laced with burning pine. The sudden breeze revived the fire inside, sending sparks spiraling upward. The mother bear recoiled, shielding her cubs again, while the man stumbled, choking on smoke. Still, the air gave them life, thin, dangerous, but real. The temperature dropped by degrees, enough to breathe. The cabin groaned, but held. The man slumped against the wall, his breath ragged but steady. Outside, the fire shifted direction, carried by wind, momentarily retreating. For a fleeting second, survival seemed possible. The bear lifted her head toward the gap, sniffing at freedom just beyond the splintered frame. The world outside was chaos, yet somehow it still smelled less dangerous than staying inside.
Minutes became indistinguishable from hours. The man's vision blurred between flame and shadow. He turned his head toward the bears, now huddled together in exhausted quiet. His mind, fevered and near delirium, registered something he had never allowed himself to feel: recognition. The cubs, trembling under their mother's body, were not symbols or trophies. They were simply alive. And they wanted what he wanted, to see another dawn. The weight of realization pressed heavier than his wounds. Around them, the fire began to dim, its rage softening into waves of smoldering heat. The world beyond the window glowed in shades of orange and gray, a purgatory of survival. The man's hand twitched once, reaching not for the weapon, but toward the air, as if grasping at forgiveness he didn't deserve. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, the bear did not move to strike. The night reached its cruelest hour. The cabin's walls quivered with collapsing strength. The mother bear stood over her cubs, sensing the inevitable. The man lay motionless now, half-conscious, his face illuminated by firelight through the broken window. The outside world was no longer flame, it was storm. Wind and ash collided in spirals, hissing against the cabin's frame. Escape was possible only through that shattered gap, a small opening between two realms of danger. Her instinct screamed to move, to flee while she could, yet something in her paused. The air carried a strange pull, not mercy, not pity, but unfinished reckoning. Her cubs pressed close, their fur warm against her own trembling body. She looked once toward the fallen man, then at the living world beyond. Every choice meant loss. She took one final breath that tasted of iron, smoke, and consequence, and prepared to act.
The cabin could no longer bear its own weight. The ceiling bowed inward, shedding flakes of burning resin that floated like slow-motion embers. Beams cracked, one by one, groaning like dying trees. Outside, the wind howled in triumph as the fire completed its circle.
Inside, the world became a trembling box of sound and pressure. The cubs pressed against their mother's legs, their fur singed, their breaths sharp and terrified. The man stirred once, weakly, his body framed by light leaking through the splitting roof. The mother bear lowered her head, scanning for escape routes that no longer existed. Smoke clawed through every seam, swallowing shape and color until everything turned to shadow and glare. The forest, the cabin, the air, they had all merged into a single living blaze. Survival demanded motion, yet every motion promised death. The fire had reached its final appetite, and it was inside. The cabin's bones screamed. Timber snapped with a deafening crack that sent sparks raining across the floor. The mother bear rose, strength gathering from pure instinct. Behind her, the cubs cried, small voices nearly drowned by the roar. The man turned toward them, his face ghost white beneath soot. In that fraction of a second, the room's chaos paused, 3 lives suspended in indecision. Then the ceiling sagged again, a shower of flame erupting as air rushed through broken walls. The bear lunged forward, not toward the man, but toward the doorway. Her shoulders slammed into the beam, breaking it loose, sending shards of wood into the air. The blast forced a gap in the collapsing wall, a wound in the cabin's body. Beyond it, smoke gave way to rainlight, faint but real. She didn't look back. Instinct carried her forward, carrying the last breath of survival with her.
The bear burst through the broken wall, her cubs tumbling close behind her. The air outside burned with heat, yet it felt clean compared to the choking death inside. Rain had begun to fall in thin, hesitant lines, hissing against embers and turning dust into steam. Every drop struck the bear's back like a brand, but she didn't slow. The cubs stumbled, coughing, their fur glistening with ash and sweat. Behind them, the cabin's glow intensified, the fire feeding on oxygen, roaring in protest. A final explosion threw fragments of wood and sparks skyward, painting the world with a violent shimmer. The bear didn't look back. She ran toward the darkness beyond the clearing, where smoke thickened into sheltering fog. For the first time since the inferno began, the fire's roar was behind her, not above or beneath. Survival had shape again. It ran on 4 trembling legs. At the forest's edge, the mother turned once more toward the blaze. Through the curtain of smoke, the cabin pulsed like a dying star, collapsing inward. Within its glow, a single shape still moved, faint, flickering, human. The man was alive, crawling toward the shattered doorway. His movements were slow, almost reverent, as if he sought not escape but acknowledgement. The bear watched, chest heaving, rain dripping from her muzzle. In another world, perhaps she would have understood what he reached for, a final act, a final reckoning. Lightning flashed overhead, white and pure, cutting across the valley. For a brief instant, time froze, one creature watching another dissolve into its own choices. Then the roof folded inward, flames swallowing the rest. The sound of impact rolled like thunder, echoing long after the cabin ceased to exist. The mother turned away. There was nothing left to see, only to remember. Rain thickened, mingling with smoke, creating a sky that flickered between orange and gray. Each droplet carried traces of ash, falling like memories that refused to fade. The forest hissed in pain, but beneath that sound, life began to whisper. Small creatures emerged from burrows, disoriented, drawn by the scent of change. The mother bear moved through the haze, her cubs clinging close, their fur damp and heavy. In the distance, the fire still glowed faintly,
a pulse fading under the storm's rhythm. For every flame that died, another heartbeat returned to the soil. She paused on a rise overlooking the ruin, her massive frame outlined by the dim light. The valley that had been her home was now a graveyard of smoke. Yet within its ashes, something ancient stirred. Resilience. The world was ending, but it was also beginning, reshaped by fire, tested by loss, tempered by survival. The final collapse came not with a roar, but with a muffled sigh. Deep within the cabin's remains, trapped air ignited against a fallen fuel canister. The result was instantaneous, a burst of orange light that flared against the storm, lifting debris in a single upward gasp. Ash rain in spirals, settling softly over the surrounding forest like gray snow. The sound rolled through the valley, carrying both ending and release. In the distance, the bear froze, her head turning sharply at the sound. The cubs pressed closer, alarmed. The mountains swallowed the echo, leaving behind a deep silence, the kind that only follows the completion of destruction. What had been man's refuge and his trap was now reduced to glowing rubble. The earth absorbed it without ceremony, as it always did. In the aftermath, rain continued to fall, steady, cleansing, indifferent to what or who had burned.
Morning arrived muted, pale, almost afraid to reveal itself. The forest floor steamed gently, releasing the night's violence into the air. Trees stood like ghosts, their bark blackened but still upright, their branches stripped bare. The mother bear moved cautiously through the softened ground, leaving prints that filled slowly with rainwater. The cubs followed, their movements sluggish but steady. In the valley below, the cabin was nothing but shape and smoke, a black scar against gray soil. The fire had moved on, leaving silence heavy and absolute. No bird dared sing, even the wind held its breath. In this strange quiet, the sound of the cubs' steps echoed unnaturally loud. Life persisted, but it had to learn how to breathe again. The storm had ended, but its memory clung to everything it spared, as if to remind the living what it cost them to remain. When the rain eased and the world began to cool, the remnants of the cabin revealed what the fire had hidden. Amid twisted beams and pools of ash, a human shape lay motionless. The man's body was charred, but still whole enough to recognize intent in its position. His hand extended toward the ruined doorway, fingers half curled around something metallic. When the soot was brushed away by the wind, a trap emerged, bent, deformed, useless. The hunter had reached for his creation in his last moment, as if desperate to reclaim his power. Around him, the earth was marked with signs of struggle, blood, claw, and motion. There was no trace of the bear. The investigators, when they came later, would assume she perished. They would mark him as another victim of the fire, never realizing he had been its architect, consumed by his own beginning.
Days passed. Rain gave way to mist, and mist gave way to calm. The forest began to breathe again, tentative but persistent. Ferns sprouted from the edges of the blackened soil, their green defiance breaking through layers of ash. Yet near the cabin's remains, one absence remained unspoken: the missing mother.
No bones, no carcass, no trace of her existence. Her tracks ended where the forest thickened again, vanishing into fog. Rumors whispered through nearby villages, sightings of movement deep in the charred valleys, shadows too large to belong to deer. The fire's destruction had created a myth, half tragedy, half warning. In the stories told by those who came after, the hunter died a hero and the beast vanished. But nature doesn't forget so easily. Somewhere beyond the line where ash turns to moss, something still moved, watching the world rebuild what the fire tried to erase. For months, the forest carried its silence like a scar. The rivers reclaimed their flow, animals returned to the edges, and the valley began to green. But in every retelling, the mother bear remained a phantom, an echo that no one could prove existed. The hunters who ventured near the ruins found claw marks etched deep into the surviving stones, fresher than they should have been. The investigators dismissed them as coincidence, but locals called them signatures, reminders. To them, she was not gone but transformed, reborn through flame into something more than animal, less than ghost. Nature had its way of marking what it chose to spare. And though the world above moved on, the soil beneath still remembered the weight of her steps. The fire had burned its story, but not its witness. The mother bear lived within the silence, unseen, yet ever present.
Weeks later, the skies opened once more, but this time the rain did not fall in anger. It came soft, slow, deliberate, like the forest exhaling for the first time. Drops fell over blackened trunks, tracing silver lines down bark turned to coal. The ground hissed with relief, drinking deeply from the sky's forgiveness. Steam rose again, but it smelled of renewal, not ruin. Ash mixed with water, forming ribbons that ran down into the lowlands, carrying away what was left of the fire's memory. In the distance, green tried to breathe again, tiny shoots piercing through the cracks of charred soil. Nature was rebuilding in silence, as it always did, neither mourning nor celebrating, only continuing. In the rhythm of rainfall, there was no grief, only persistence. Yet beneath that sound, deeper than the thunder's echo, another pulse moved unseen, a reminder that something had survived the blaze's final judgment. Through the drizzle, movement stirred near the edge of a ravine. Two small forms, drenched and trembling, emerged from the mist. The cubs, once bright-eyed, now dulled by hunger and fear, wandered through the wet remains of their home. Their paws sank into mud still warm beneath its skin, the ghosts of fire hidden under rain. They followed scents that faded as quickly as they appeared, each one promising safety, none delivering it. Their calls echoed through hollow trees, unanswered. The forest had changed, familiar paths erased, landmarks turned to shadow. They rested beneath a fallen branch, shivering, huddled together against the cold. Their survival was no miracle, it was instinct stretched thin. Above them, clouds parted briefly, revealing a single streak of sunlight through the steam. It fell upon their tiny shapes like a whisper of promise, that the world hadn't forgotten them entirely, not yet.
Days bled into nights, unmarked by comfort or direction. The cubs learned to live in fragments, rainwater from leaves, scraps of bark to chew, insects caught between claws. The forest, once a cradle, had become a labyrinth of echoes. Hunger grew sharp, bending their movements into clumsy hunts. They stalked shadows that vanished before touch. At times they returned to the edge of the valley, where the cabin's ruins still smoked faintly under moonlight. The air there held a scent they both recognized, yet could not follow, part memory, part ghost. They slept curled against each other, their breathing shallow, their dreams restless. Nature was kind enough to let them live, but too honest to make it easy. Above the hills, the sky pulsed with the glow of rebirth. Life, fragile and stubborn, continued its slow crawl back from the edge.
But something was still missing. Someone. The morning after another cold night, the wind shifted. It carried with it a scent the cubs knew instantly. Deep, earthy, unmistakable. The smell of their mother. They froze, nostrils flaring, hearts hammering in fragile bodies. The scent was faint but true, threading through damp leaves and scorched pine. They began to move, slowly at first, then faster, climbing through the tangle of regrown vines. Every few steps the wind teased them with hope, then stole it away. But hope was enough. Their tiny roars broke the stillness, echoing across the ravine. The forest seemed to listen. Somewhere beyond the fog, a larger shadow stirred, silent yet deliberate. The world, momentarily, held its breath. The cubs stopped, ears lifted, waiting. Through the mist, a figure emerged, massive, dark, moving with the heavy grace of endurance. The scent grew stronger. The impossible had returned. The mother bear lived.
From the mist, she stepped forward, scarred, soaked, half blind, yet alive. The cubs rushed to her with small, desperate cries that cut through the silence. She lowered her massive head, breathing them in, confirming through scent what her wounded eyes could barely see. Her fur was scorched in places, her left side marked with burns that glowed faintly beneath new rain. She stood unsteady but resolute, her presence vast enough to anchor the chaos around her. The cubs pressed against her legs, trembling with relief. For a long time, nothing moved except the rain falling around them. The forest, once an enemy, seemed to bow to their reunion. The fire had taken much, but it had not claimed the bond that defined their survival. The mother exhaled, a deep, rumbling sound that rolled through the clearing like thunder from beneath the earth. Life had reclaimed what it nearly lost. They remained together beneath a charred arch of fallen trees, the rain muffling every sound except their breathing. The cubs explored her with trembling paws, tracing scars they did not understand. Each wound told a story of endurance, burns from timber, cuts from shattered glass, a long gash across her flank that still wept faintly. The mother endured it all without flinching, her body a fortress once more. For the first time in weeks, the cubs slept deeply, pressed into her fur, surrounded by warmth that no fire could steal again. Above them clouds thinned, revealing fragments of a pale moon. The world looked washed clean, stripped of noise and cruelty. The forest had witnessed its own rebirth. In the stillness of that embrace, there were no predators, no prey, only survivors. The rain softened to drizzle, and for the first time since the inferno, peace returned.
By dawn, the mother began to move again. The forest was quiet, cautious, as if uncertain whether to welcome her back. She led her cubs along a path carved by memory, guided by the faint rhythm of rivers reborn under ash. The terrain grew familiar, the curve of a ridge, the scent of scorched oak, the hollow where smoke still lingered. When they reached the clearing, the cabin's remains stood like bones under fog. The mother hesitated at its edge, sensing echoes of heat still trapped beneath the earth. The cubs sniffed curiously, unafraid, unaware of the history written in soot and ruin. The mother lowered her head, studying the ground, tracing her own footprints fossilized in ash. This was where she had fought, bled, and burned. Now she had returned not for vengeance, but understanding. The cabin no longer threatened, it merely remembered. The ground around the ruins was soft, soaked by weeks of rain. When the mother's claws dug into the soil, they struck something harder than stone: metal. She scraped again, uncovering a twisted shape, then another. Shards of cages, steel bars warped by fire.
The smell of rust and oil rose, sharp and sour. Beneath the blackened surface, a network of forgotten traps slept, hidden beneath the roots. Each piece told the same story: preparation, intent, capture. Her breathing slowed, heavy with realization. The fire had not found them by chance, it had been born here. Around the ruins, more evidence glinted. A fuel canister split open, half-melted nets, scattered tranquilizer darts turned brittle by heat. Every secret buried beneath the cabin spoke of one truth: this was not nature's accident, but man's design. The fire had devoured its maker, yet his purpose still smoldered under the soil.
As she explored the wreckage, her claws overturned what remained of a trunk half buried under soot. The lock had melted, sealing its contents until the rain softened the wood. Inside, fragments of paper clung together in lumps of ash and glue. She pawed through them, scattering black petals across the ground. Beneath them, photographs survived. Faces, cages, and the unmistakable image of a bear cub behind bars. Each picture was labeled, numbers scrawled by a human hand. There were maps, too, their corners burned, but still legible enough to trace the hunter's routes through the forest. Her scent was on them. She recognized the places, the rivers, the dens. Rage and sorrow rose within her like twin fires, but neither consumed her. The truth had burned everything else. It could not burn her resolve. The forest was her home again, and its justice would no longer require flame. The rain eased, leaving only mist. The mother stood, motionless before the ruins, her eyes fixed on the ashes where the hunter's body once lay. She understood now. The fire was his doing, the blaze a snare meant to drive her kind from hiding. He had played with nature as if it were his possession, and in the end, his own arrogance had devoured him. The forest did not kill him. His own intent did. She turned her gaze toward the horizon, where new shoots broke through charred ground. Life was reclaiming the wound he left behind. The cubs pressed close to her legs, unaware of the history beneath their paws. The air was heavy with the scent of renewal, but also remembrance. Nature had taken its balance back, quietly, without vengeance, without mercy. The fire had not ended her. It had revealed the truth of what deserved to burn.
The storm cleared, leaving behind a washed sky the color of smoke. The mother bear lingered at the ruins, the rain-soaked earth beneath her paws whispering its secrets. Scents drifted upward, metal, blood, and the faint trace of man. Memory rose unbidden. Flashes of his shape moving through flame, the sound of his rifle, the glint of his traps. They came as fragments, disconnected yet vivid. She remembered the eyes that had once hunted her kind, the hands that had spread fire with purpose, but now those same hands had turned to dust. The forest had erased him, leaving only lessons behind. The cubs nosed curiously at a half-burned trap, their innocence contrasting the violence buried below. The mother turned away from the remnants, aware that remembrance was both burden and warning. The forest never forgets. It simply reclaims what was taken, slowly, silently, and without apology. As dawn filtered through the mist, the mother bear stood over the clearing like a monument carved from survival itself. Around her, life reawakened, the hum of insects, the slow drip of water from leaves, the hesitant rustle of wings returning. Yet the ground beneath her feet was poisoned with human scent, a residue of intent that fire alone couldn't cleanse. She understood, not through reason, but instinct, that the true predator had never been nature.
It was creation turned against its own maker, greed masquerading as dominance. The hunter had feared beasts, but his destruction had been crafted by human arrogance. The cubs played nearby, rolling in wet ash, unknowing heirs to the story their world had written in flame. For them, survival was enough. For her, survival meant witness. The forest had balanced its scales not with violence, but with the quiet certainty of consequence.
The valley lay still, wrapped in fog and renewal. Smoke no longer haunted the sky, replaced by the soft haze of dawn. The forest had chosen its justice, not through revenge, but through reflection. The fire had devoured its architect, the land had consumed its poison. The mother bear moved among the ruins, her massive frame framed by light filtering through steam. Every motion she made was deliberate, a rhythm aligned with something eternal. She paused where the hunter's body had been found, the earth now cool beneath her pads. No hatred stirred within her, only understanding. The forest had corrected itself. Nature never sought vengeance, it simply removed imbalance. As the wind swept through the clearing, ash lifted into the air, spiraling upward like souls freed from their weight. Somewhere deep within the trees, water began to run again. Balance had returned, carried on the breath of rain. She moved slowly through the reborn forest, tracing the river that had once reflected fire. Now it shimmered with clarity, revealing stones scrubbed clean by rain. Her reflection, fractured by ripples, looked older, marked with loss, but carved with endurance. The cubs followed behind her, their fur streaked with mud, their steps small but confident. Together they crossed through the corridor of regrowth, every leaf glistening like glass. Justice was not an act of revenge, but existence itself. She had lived when she was not meant to. That was her defiance, her triumph, her testament. The forest, scarred yet breathing, mirrored her resilience. Where man had burned, nature had healed. Where fire had taken, rain had returned. The hunter's traps rusted into the soil, their sharpness dulled by time. Survival had rewritten the law of the forest, and in that rewriting, every breath became its own quiet form of justice.
Seasons shifted subtly, and the forest began to remember color. Young leaves shimmered pale green under sunlight that no longer carried the sting of heat. The rivers swelled, washing away soot and char. Mushrooms bloomed on blackened logs, transforming decay into life. Birds nested in hollowed trunks once hollowed by flame. The forest's recovery was neither forgiveness nor forgetting. It was transformation. The mother bear guided her cubs through this reborn world, teaching them where to drink, where to dig, where to listen. Every step pressed renewal into soil once dead. Life had returned, but it carried scars. A reminder that beauty grows best from what nearly destroyed it. The forest didn't erase the memory of fire, it absorbed it, wove it into every green leaf and quiet wind. It had learned what all living things eventually do. Survival is not victory, it is continuation. And continuation was everything. In the clearing where the cabin once stood, laughter returned. Not human, but wild. The cubs chased each other through soft grass, tumbling over roots that had sprouted from the ashes. Their playfulness filled the air with rhythm, a heartbeat the forest had missed. The mother watched from the shade, her breathing steady, her eyes softer than the day she escaped the flames. The wind moved through her fur, cool and gentle, carrying scents of moss and rain. Around her, flowers bloomed in defiance, rising from the soil once blackened by man's ambition. The forest responded to the cubs' movement as though recognizing its own rebirth in their joy.
For a few precious moments, the world was simple again. No traps, no fire, no fear. Only life, in motion, laughter as legacy. What the fire sought to erase, innocence had returned to reclaim, pure and unbroken.
Weeks later, a storm unearthed what remained of the forest's forgotten witness. Half buried beneath roots and ash, the small wildlife camera blinked once more, its single red light resurrected by moisture. Inside, its lens had captured everything: the fire's birth, the chaos within the cabin, the struggle, the escape. Its battery, long thought dead, flickered back to life for one final act of remembrance. The forest moved around it without interest. Nature had no use for proof. Yet the device remained, a silent observer of balance restored. One day, perhaps, a human might find it and see what nature had seen: the arrogance, the cost, and the quiet aftermath. But for now, it lay among moss and stone, humming softly to itself. Even in ruin, it recorded, not for judgment, but for memory. Because sometimes survival deserves to be remembered, even if no one remains to watch. The forest no longer burned, it breathed. The wind that once carried screams now carried pollen. Rivers murmured songs of renewal, threading through valleys that shimmered in morning gold. The cabin was gone, its story buried beneath layers of soil and time. Yet in the stillness, its echoes lingered, not of man or beast, but of coexistence, however brief. The fire had stripped everything to its essence. What remained was truth. That survival does not belong to strength alone, but to adaptation, to endurance, to surrender when fighting fails. The wild does not seek forgiveness. It teaches it through consequence. The mother bear, the cubs, the forest, they had all been remade by flame and rain alike. Their story was neither tragedy nor triumph. It was simply the world reclaiming balance. In every ember, a seed had hidden. In every ending, a beginning waited to rise.
On a ridge overlooking the valley, the mother bear paused. The air was cool, the horizon clean. Below her, the reborn forest stretched in quiet beauty, green and gold beneath the fading mist. She looked once toward the place where the cabin had stood, now covered in ferns and wildflowers. Her eyes lingered not with grief but recognition. The past no longer haunted, it instructed. Behind her, the cubs played, unbothered by the weight of history beneath their paws. The mother lifted her head, tasting the air, a scent of life untainted by fire or fear. The world was once again vast, mysterious, and whole. She turned away from the valley and walked into the shade, her figure dissolving into the wilderness that had birthed her. The forest swallowed her presence gently, as if welcoming back its guardian. Balance, fragile yet certain, had finally been restored. Evening fell like a promise. The forest glowed faintly in the light of a new sun dipping below the ridge. Dew shimmered on every blade of grass, catching the last warmth of the day. The wind whispered through branches that had once burned, carrying seeds into unseen futures. No trace of fire remained, only the quiet hum of continuation. The valley, scarred yet alive, breathed in perfect rhythm with the sky. The camera's red light blinked once, its final heartbeat, before fading into darkness. Somewhere deep within the forest, a mother bear led her cubs toward the river, their silhouettes blending into twilight. The story ended not in silence but in renewal. Nature had spoken, not with words, but with survival. The fire had taken, the rain had healed, and the wild endured. The forest would remember always, because memory, like life, never truly burns away.